And nice thing about this book, there's a picture of O. Henry in the back, and a little older than his penitentiary years, and Billy Ireland. Sorry. And here's a picture of, this is from the show in Greensboro, 5 by O. Henry. That's a picture of O. Henry, probably closer to his penitentiary years. So next on our program is If Grant Had Been Drinking at Appomattox, which was published in the New Yorker in December 6, 1930, and in The Middle-Aged Man on the Flying Trapeze in 1935, and also included in the Thurber Carnival in 1945.
The morning of the 9th of April, 1865, dawned beautifully. General Meade was up with the first streaks of crimson in the eastern sky. General Hooker and General Burnside were up and had breakfasted by 8:15. The day continued beautiful. It drew on toward 11 o'clock. General Ulysses S. Grant was still not up. He was asleep in his famous old Navy hammock, swung high above the floor of his headquarters bedroom. Headquarters was distressingly disarranged. Papers were strewn on the floor. Confidential notes from spies scurried here and there in the breeze from an open window. The dregs of an overturned wine bottle flowed pinkly across an important military map. Corporal Schultz of the 65th Ohio Volunteer Infantry, aide to General Grant, came into the room, looked around him, and sighed. He shook the general's hammock roughly, making it sway gently.
Pardon, sir, but this is the day of surrender. You ought to be up.
General Ulysses S. Grant opened one eye.
Don't swing me. I feel terrible.
He turned over and closed his eyes again.
General Lee will be here any minute now.
The corporal firmly swung the hammock again.
You cut that out? You want to make me sick or what?
Schultz clicked his heels and saluted.
What's he coming here for?
This is the day of surrender, sir.
350 generals in the northern armies, and he has to come to me about this? What time is it?
You're the commander-in-chief, sir. It's 11:25.
Don't be crazy. Lincoln is the commander-in-chief. Nobody in the history of the world ever surrendered before lunch. Doesn't he know that an army surrenders on its stomach?
The generals of the Confederacy will be here any minute now. You really ought to be up, sir.
All right, all right.
He stretched and yawned and rose to a sitting position. He stared about the room.
This place looks awful.
You must have had quite a time of it last night, sir.
Yeah, I was wrestling some general with a beard.
Schultz helped the commander of the northern armies in the field find his clothes.
Where's my other sock?
Schultz looked around for it. The general walked uncertainly to a table and poured a drink from a bottle.
I don't think it wise to drink, sir.
Never mind about me. I can take it or let it alone. You ever heard the story about the fellow went to Lincoln to complain about me drinking too much? So-and-so says Grant drinks too much, this fellow said. So-and-so is a fool, said Lincoln. So this fellow went to what's-his-name and told him what Lincoln said, and he came roaring to Lincoln about it. Did you tell so-and-so I was a fool, he said. No, said Lincoln, I thought he knew it. That's how I stand with Lincoln.
The soft thudding sounds of horses' hooves came through the open window. Schultz hurried over and looked out.
Footsteps.
It's General Lee and his staff.
Show him in.
The general took another drink.
And see what the boys in the back room will have.
Schultz walked smartly over to the door, opened it, saluted, and stood aside. General Lee, dignified against the blue of an April sky, magnificent in his dress uniform, stood for a moment framed in the doorway. He walked in, followed by his staff. They bowed and stood silent. General Grant stared at them. He only had one boot on, and his jacket was unbuttoned.
I know who you are. You're Robert Browning, the poet.
I'm General Robert E. Lee, sir.
Oh, I thought you were Robert Browning. You certainly look like Robert Browning. There was a poet for you, Lee. Browning. You ever read How They Brought the Good News from Ghent to Aix? Up Derrick to saddle, up Derrick away, up Dunder, up Blitzen, up Prancer, up Dancer, up Bouncer, up Vixen, up...
Shall we proceed at once to the matter at hand?
General Lee disdainfully looked about the disordered room.
Some of the boys was wrestling here last night. I threw Sherman or some general a whole lot like Sherman. It was pretty dark.
He handed a bottle of scotch to the commanding officer of the Southern armies, who stood holding it in amazement and discomfiture.
Get a glass, somebody.
Grant was looking straight at General Longstreet.
Can I meet you at Cold Harbor?
General Longstreet did not answer. General Lee was getting impatient.
I should like to have this over with as soon as possible.
Grant looked vaguely at Schultz, who walked up close to him, frowning.
The surrender, sir, the surrender.
Oh, sure, all right, here we go.
He took another drink. Slowly, sadly, he unbuckled his sword. Then he handed it to the astonished General Lee.
There you are, General. We damn near licked you. If I'd been feeling better, we would have licked you.
And last but not least, the Macbeth Murder Mystery. Published in the New Yorker, October 2nd, 1937. Later in My World and Welcome to It, 1942. And also included in the Thurber Carnival.
I was having tea with an American lady I'd met at an English country hotel.
It was a stupid mistake to make, but it was on the counter with the other Penguin paperbacks, and I supposed, of course, it was a detective story. All the others were detective stories. I'd read all the others, so I bought this one without really looking at it carefully. You can imagine how mad I was when I discovered it was Shakespeare.
Oh, how distressing.
I don't see why the Penguin people had to put out the Shakespeare plays in the same size and everything as the detective stories.
I think they had different colored jackets.
Well, I didn't notice that. Anyway, I got real comfy in bed that night and all ready to read a good mystery, and here I had The Tragedy of Macbeth, a book for high school students.
Like Ivanhoe or Lorna Doone.
Exactly. And I was just crazy for a good Agatha Christie or something. Hercule Poirot is my favorite detective.
Is he the rabbity one?
Oh, no. He's the Belgian one. You're thinking of Mr. Pinkerton, the one that helps Inspector Bull. He's good, too.
Tell me, did you read Macbeth?
I had to read it. There wasn't a scrap of anything else to read in the whole room.
Did you like it?
No, I did not. In the first place, I don't think for a moment that Macbeth did it.
Did what?
I don't think for a moment that he killed the king. I don't think the Macbeth woman was mixed up in it either. You suspect them the most, of course, but those are the ones that are never guilty, or shouldn't be anyway.
I'm afraid that
But don't you see? It would spoil everything if you could figure out right away who did it. Shakespeare was too smart for that. I've read that people never have figured out Hamlet, so it's not likely that Shakespeare would have made Macbeth as simple as it seems.
Who do you suspect?
Macduff.
Good God.
Oh, Macduff did it all right. Hercule Poirot would have got him easily.
How did you figure it out?
Well, I didn't right away. At first, I suspected Banquo. And then, of course, he was the second person killed. That was good right in there, that part. The person you suspected the first murder should always be the second victim.
Is that so?
Oh, yes. They have to keep surprising you. Well, after the second murder, I didn't know who the killer was for a while.
How about Malcolm and Donalbain, the king's sons? And as I remember it, they fled right after the first murder. That looks suspicious.
Too suspicious. Much too suspicious. When they flee, they're never guilty. You can count on that. Do you know who discovered Duncan's body?
I'm sorry, I forgot.
Macduff discovers it. Then he comes running down the stairs and shouts, "Confusion has broke open the Lord's anointed temple, and sacrilegious murder has made his masterpiece," and on like that. All that stuff was rehearsed. You wouldn't say a lot of stuff like that offhand, would you, if you had found a body?
Well, I would have...
Of course you're right, you wouldn't, unless you had practiced it in advance. "My God, there's a body in there," is what an innocent man would say.
Well, what do you make of the third murderer? The third murderer has puzzled Macbeth scholars for 300 years.
That's because they never thought of Macduff. It was Macduff, I'm certain. You couldn't have one of the victims murdered by two ordinary thugs. The murderer always has to be somebody important.
What about the banquet scene? How do you account for Macbeth's guilty actions there when Banquo's ghost came in and sat in his chair?
There wasn't any ghost. A big, strong man doesn't go around seeing ghosts, especially in a brightly lighted banquet hall with dozens of people around. Macbeth was shielding somebody.
Who was he shielding?
Well, Mrs. Macbeth, of course. He thought she did it and was going to take the rap himself. The husband always does that when the wife is suspected.
But what about the sleepwalking scene?
The same thing, only the other way around. That time she was shielding him. She wasn't asleep at all. Do you remember where it says, "Enter Lady Macbeth with a taper"?
Yes.
Well, people who walk in their sleep never carry lights. They have a second sight. Did you ever hear of a sleepwalker carrying a light?
No, I never did.
Well then, she wasn't asleep. She was acting guilty to shield Macbeth.
I believe that you have got hold of something. Would you lend me that Macbeth? I'd like to look it over tonight. I don't feel somehow as if I've ever really read it. I read the play over carefully that night, and the next morning after breakfast I sought out the American Woman. Could I see you alone?
You found out something?
I found out the name of the murderer.
You mean it wasn't Macduff?
Macduff is as innocent of those murders as Macbeth and the Macbeth Woman. Here, in Act 2, Scene 2, you'll see where Lady Macbeth says, "I laid their daggers ready. He could not miss 'em. Had he not resembled my father as he slept, I'd have done it." You see?
No, I don't.
But it's simple. No wonder I didn't see it years ago. The reason Duncan resembled Lady Macbeth's father as he slept is that he actually was her father.
Good God.
Lady Macbeth's father killed the king, and hearing someone coming, thrust the body under the bed and crawled into the bed himself.
But you can't have a murderer who only appears in the story once. You can't have that.
I know that. It says here in Act 3, Scene 4, enter Ross with an old man. Now, that old man is never identified. It is my contention that it is old Mr. Macbeth, whose ambition it was to make his daughter queen. There you have your motive.
But even then, he's still a minor character.
Not when you realize he is one of the weird sisters in disguise.
You mean one of the three witches?
Precisely. Listen to this speech of the old man's. "On Tuesday last, a falcon towering in her pride of place was by a mousing owl hawked at and killed." Who does that sound like?
It sounds like the way the three witches talk.
Precisely.
Maybe you're right, but
I'm sure I am. And do you know what I'm going to do now?
no. What?
Buy a copy of Hamlet and solve that.
Then you don't think Hamlet did it?
I'm absolutely positive he didn't.
But who do you suspect?
Everybody.
Thank you all for coming. That's the show. And we're very